Hi everyone, my name's Declan McGlynn. Welcome to Friday Forum Live, Point Blank's weekly broadcast bringing you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and industry insight every Friday live from East London. Today we are joined by Point Blank instructor Justin Lindley to investigate mixing with free plugins. So today, it's all about mixing with free plugins. And if you want to take your mixes to the next level, you can find out more about our mixing courses at pointblanklondon.com. And remember, we are totally live, so get your questions for Justin in the chat and we'll get to them throughout the broadcast. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to our channel for more tutorials, masterclasses and live events. Justin, welcome back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. I'm doing good, yes, thank you.
So free plugins, it's a minefield out there. It's a crazy world, free plugins. There's so many.
There are.
Of varying quality.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, you could certainly, I always kind of think that all the things that you kind of get with your workstation are kind of free, in that, you know. But today I'm just looking at third-party free things and trying to narrow it down a bit, ones that I have actually found good use for, things that really do add something, some extra character and other things, without necessarily going out and spending money on all the UADs and waves and all those kind of things.
We've already had a shout out to Anthony Lopez and Taki Music Production who've been giving us their tips of like the best plugins that they've used, so keep those coming.
Yeah,
so
great.
Everyone will benefit from that.
Because even though I did set out to try and make it a completely perfect list, it's not going to. I'm going to miss loads of things, so it's great if people fill in with any tips and so on that they've got. That's great. So basically, I've tried to kind of like crowbar as many free plugins as I can into a track. It's a track by one of our students, Helena Rice, a track called Crin. I'll just play a little bit of the track and then we'll dive in and have a look what we've got in there.
Nice one.
It's quite an unusual track, unusual tempo. Something 4 to the floor, 113 BPM. I was saying you were going to reveal what genre it is, or invent a genre for it.
It's indescribable.
Yeah. I like it though, which is the reason that I did it. There's a few things in it that actually, they're quite odd sounds, so some of them don't respond in this kind of usual ways that typical basses or other things would, but there's plenty for us to get to grips in here anyway. So I'll mainly be looking at this kind of section of the track. It goes into quite some different areas, but okay, I'll just click on it, heads into different areas like this bit, and then it's a kind of atmospheric breakdown thing at the end. Not at the end, it comes back into the like the intro bit again over here, just to give Helena a bit of a
it's cool.
Right, okay. So the usual thing, we'll make one little annoying loop that we'll all be sick of by the end of it in the traditional manner.
Can't wait.
So let's dive in. So one of the first things that I got in the habit of loading up when I start a project, or I try and load it up at the beginning, is a company called Hofer, that they make a lot of kind of mastering things, and they also have this whole department about acoustics and all this stuff. They're pretty high-endy things, but they do this little bundle of plugins that are free. They're for you little bundle, and one of them that I use a lot of the time is called Project Time, which is really helpful actually, just to kind of get a real grip on how long you spend making a track or mixing it or working on it. I think I'm hoping that I actually left this running at some point and went and made my dinner or something, because the idea that I might have spent that long on it is horrifying. But it's really useful, even if, particularly if you are doing something professionally and you're getting paid to do something, it's a good perspective, isn't it? It's like, well, you're getting paid this much to do a mix, and I spent how long on it? It should have a too long flashing thing or something. So
I guess it's just handy to know.
But yeah, it's a good perspective on how long you spend working on your stuff. They make a couple of other metering tools that we'll come back to look at the end of our kind of output chain for levels and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of split it up into EQs and compressors and sections like that. So if we dive in and have a little look at EQs first. So I'll go down here to my kick drum, and I've mentioned this one before from Tokyo Dawn Records, Tokyo Dawn Labs. This EQ, I'm really starting to like this a lot actually. It does add a lot of different characters. It's got all these different styles here, and it has more of a noticeable sound if you have the saturation on. And yeah, I've got this on the kick drum and it's done what I needed to with it. As you can see there, I've actually used the low rather than it being a low shelf. I've made a little dip and taken out some mids with it. Yeah, and then adding a bit of thump and a little high pass filter. So that's definitely one to check out and play around with it. There's a lot of things from Tokyo Dawn Labs that are good.
Really
I'll be having a look at some of those in here. So we're going to be kind of really jumping through some of this stuff today. There's a little kind of funny little rhythm beat in the background, but another EQ here. Some of you that have maybe seen Pultec style EQs before. This is one from a company called Ignite Amps that mostly make model amplifiers and pedals and those kind of things. But this is a Pultec style EQ that they make. And it's not as sort of noticeably Pultec-y as like ones from UAD or Waves or whatever, but it definitely has some of that kind of sound and quality to it and some of those weird curves that you get in the equalizer. Yeah. And has a bit more character as well if you drive the input a bit, because obviously they've modelled the kind of tube response of it. So that's another one that's definitely worth checking out. Again, I'm just unmodifying a little bit my little loop with that one. Where's my colour EQ gone? So here's a rather, what sound have I got that on? I've got quite a few of these on things in my mix here. This is from DDMF. There's all sorts of people not making particularly catchy names for their plugins or for their companies, but Colour EQ is one that initially looks more like the kind of plugins you'd get in your stock things in Logic or Ableton or whatever, just a sort of channel type EQ. So it's doing the more accurate stuff, low cuts and so on, rather than just being totally quirky. But then it does have a very quirky other element to it that I'm still a little bit new to exploring, in that if I go and boost something in the mids, it's a quite unusual shape. And then that unusual shape gets even more unusual if we go to this type B here and becomes all these kind of weird double peaking things. And it's really unusual sounding. I mean, if you're using it, you can see that at the moment it's only this is only 5 dB when we're right up at the top here. So even though it looks like it's doing something really drastic and crazy, it's quite interesting for adding presence or boosting kind of more than one thing without, it's just very different sounding. So another one to check out. So I've just been using it for kind of relatively sane things for now, but I've been exploring it so far. That's a lot of these things are. That's kind of like finding things that, there's so much stuff out there. It's trying to find things that, well, I like that one for that thing. That's kind of logged in my memory as something that's good for adding a particular character to something and just get a good result out of. Here we go again. We've got another sound here. I'll sort of explain more of this sort of in context as we go along in the mix, as we hear things. This is another one that I've only recently found from a company called Kuasa, and I guess that says Basic Q, and it's a model Baxendale EQ, which is a particular shape. It's a very old design of equalizer, where they're usually a low and a high shelf that have these very long curves, and they don't like flatten out in the same way that a sort of typical shelf in kind of Logic channel plugin would. They tend to curve up for longer. So the mastering engineers have liked them for a long time because they really open up the top end, and this one's a free one, and it's definitely adding quite a lot of little brightness and sparkle to my sound here. One of the things just with this mix was trying to make some things that are quite similar sounding frequency synths, just have a little bit of difference to them, a little difference to the depth. So yeah, that's another one that, again, just this kind of quite broad, well, really broad actually, kind of boosts and cuts on it. Definitely worth checking out. Character again, something that has a different tone to it. And another one down in our, if I pop to the other end, this is a real point blank favourite. The Lufticus.
Friend.
Yeah, people really get on with this one for everything from over the whole mix to just an EQ on different elements in the track.
Yeah.
It's so different from using like the channel EQs where you've got an analyzer and you're doing very precise things. These are all super broad and really quite weird frequencies, aren't they? I mean, the bottom thing being 10 hertz, which I usually think, well, that's way off the map. But it's so wide that it still does something if you boost or cut with it. And then all these frequency bands interact with each other. And I've just got it on my output here. I mean, you can always argue about sort of whether you should be doing any mastering as you're mixing, but I do a bit. I just like to hear kind of it sounding as finished as it can and just doing little enhancements rather than anything like that. So all I'm doing with it is boosting this 40K, which again is this ridiculously sort of shallow shelving EQ, which again at 40K there shouldn't be any audio there at 44.1 kilohertz and you shouldn't be able to hear it. So, but if you boost up there, it adds some clarity and air to your whole mix or to elements in your mix. And it's a little bit more modern sounding than, say, boosting kind of top end on some of the sort of older EQs. So even sometimes on things like vocals, it's really nice to just open up the top end, probably more like the 20K shelf or that sort of thing. So that's our EQs for now. I'm sure I've missed some. So I've used those same ones quite a few times through this mix, again for different reasons at different points. So I thought I'd get in next after looking at some of the equalizers, some of the characterful EQs, of looking at some of the sort of dynamics processors that are around there. And again, just looking for things that offer a little bit of difference. This is one I've only been playing around with in the last few days. Earreckon have a little bundle of these little, quite simple little plugins. Again, a lot of these things that are just very simple to use. Compressors where it's mostly a threshold and you've got limited choices of some other things. Sometimes that's great, you just get a good result quickly, and if it doesn't do what you want, you just turn it off and get something else. It's not gonna, you're not gonna spend ages fiddling around with it pointlessly because it's only gonna do a particular job, which is pretty cool. So I've got this on the kick drum. It's adding a little bit of thump. I've got it after all the other, it's kind of hardening it up very slightly. It's not drastic at all. My whole little drum bus here, well, they're not all sending into it as it happens, but my drum situation then has a little parallel that's the, as you can see, a little bit of the kick, a bit of the clap, and some of this rhythm section are sending into this parallel bus here. And on that one, I've got this audio damage Rough Rider, which is one of the most drastic compressors I've heard probably ever on its most extreme settings. I mean, it's not that's it on its own at the moment, but if you turn the ratio up and move what it says sensitivity, so threshold, it does a pretty massive job of obliterating things, or there are some just nice settings on it also, more subtle ones. But for drum bus stuff, it's just having that usual parallel thing. It's bringing up a lot of niceness.
The tails of the sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got it's very fast attack, and then the release is just a little bit slower. And I've got another one of those going into it. It's just cutting a bit on the low hit before it hits the compressor on the way in. So some more new ones of the week. So that was the audio damage Rough Rider. Where was the yes. So I've got this ambient noise over here, which again, like I said, there's some quite odd little sounds on here. And I was just trying to bring out a bit more detail in this one. So this company, Klanghelm, I've got a few free things that they give away. This is one of their little compressors that's been around for a while. They have a much bigger version that's, again, really cheap actually, like 20 euros or somewhere around there. And they brought out a new one this week, so I was just trying to bring up a bit of detail in the sound. So that's one that's been around a while. It sort of seems to react a bit like a sort of optical or something. I haven't actually read their thing to see what they're trying to do. But this one just appeared this week, this Klanghelm. Again, there's a bigger version of it that's a little bit of money. But this is a VaryMu compressor, which really none of the, even in the sort of Logic compressor where it has all these different circuit types and all these different things that it's trying to emulate, they haven't attempted to make a sort of Fairchild style VaryMu where the actual compression shape is to do with the compressors being valve. So this one's, again, the only free VaryMu that I've seen. And although I'm using it to make it kind of louder, it's definitely pulling up loads of detail in it and just kind of soft compression. It's really reacting quite a lot like a Fairchild would, even though it's a simple version of it, and all we've really got is how much it does it and the time constants in there. So definitely check out Klanghelm stuff, and yeah, both of these are well worth having. They have different characters, and this is always quite trial and error as well. Even it's like, well, I want to do something to a sound, I want to compress it a bit to bring up some detail or whatever it might be. So I do this whatever plugins I've got available. I'll just try it with a couple of different things and try, well, okay, on this occasion in the mix, that one's winning, so we'll go with that.
They're all free after all?
Well, they are indeed. So, what else have we got? Klanghelm, yeah, those two, the VaryMu and the other one, which might be optically. I should check, really. Should check these sort of things. And then we have Tokyo Dawn Labs again. Now the bass on this track's a really strange sound, and I was trying to make it do all sorts of things and mostly failing to get it to respond in the way I wanted. It's kind of quite a weird rumbly sound, but this TDR feedback compressor that's been around for a couple of years, I think, which actually we've used quite a lot on mastering tracks, and it's great sounding. It's really not making any attempt to be anything else other than just a really interesting digital compressor that does great gluing together, smoothing out compression. It's just all the things you could possibly want on it, from drown mix control, drown wet mix to sidechain roll off on the input. So for any bus group type things, it's a really good compressor. And yeah, a lot of, as you were saying earlier on, these things where you've got different releases for peak and RMS and all these things. Really cool. If you can be bothered getting into that much detail, that's interesting. There's some interesting stuff in there. They make another one as well that's more recent, which I've got on the whole mix bus over here, which they've suggested, obviously it's fairly similar, but they've suggested it's for mastering, and I would say it does sound a little better over the whole mix. So I've just got this on my mix bus, and although it's not like absolutely slamming it, it is tightening it up and just making everything a little bit more solid and up front. So again, pretty similar controls, but and they do a paid version of this that has a few more controls in it. Yeah. So worth having a look and checking this out. But as a bus compressor over your whole mix, this one, go on, you say it. What's it called? What do you reckon?
Kotelnikov.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a few of these pronunciation things that are going to challenge us. So sorry about that one.
Right.
So
on the spot.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely these Tokyo Dawn Labs or Tokyo Dawn Records things, they're being very generous with a lot of great sounding stuff. Again, that I'm really enjoying using. Even when I have other more expensive things available, they still offer some very useful possibilities. Trying to find things at this point is quite. Trying to remember where I've put them. Where have I put my Faraday limiter? There it is. So this one again, got on this sound here, and this one I take to be. It says a limiter. I think it's a compressor. I think it's the same idea as on a 1176 or something like that, where it says it's a limiter, but it's a compressor, isn't it? It's just a very fast compressor, basically, where it's, I assume, in the same way, looking at the peak rather than the average of the sound. And it has all the same kind of settings, except it also has vibe and warmth. So I've turned those up full. Obviously. And they seem to add more vibe and warmth, so that's good. Again, it's just kind of blowing up the sound a little bit on this main kind of synth sound. So That one is still free. They have a whole bundle of other things. That's their one little free giveaway. So I always kind of a little bit wonder as well, like, you know, it's very obvious with certain companies, like why they give you something for free. Because they want to, and it's sensible marketing, isn't it? Here's a free thing, we collect your emails, addresses, and market stuff. And then some other places, it's just like, click on the download and you get it. And it's kind of, oh, it's nice of you, but I'm not quite sure why. Or they're missing a trick to,
well, for
promote
videos like this, there you go. We're promoting them now.
Yes, indeed. So this, from Good Hertz, this Faraday limiter. So again, in terms of there being a kind of free, kind of 1176, can be quite aggressive sounding if you say it quite harshly. And it has a little display up here as well of what it's doing in terms of the actual amount of reduction. So that's encouraging. It's because you haven't got any actual kind of gain reduction metering and so on. So at least you can encourage yourself that it is doing something. You haven't just set it up and gone, oh, it's made it louder, it must be good. So that's in terms of dynamics then. Another one to mention over here, because again in that sort of dynamic section would be transient designers. On the kick, it's pretty common with kicks and snares and claps and so on, and just trying to get a little bit more punch, make the transient stick out a little bit more. This Flux Bittersweet's been around quite a while. They've made a kind of newer version of it. Very often it works well on things. It's really only got more or less, and it mostly seems to be the transient on the front. On this particular kick though, this other one from Audio Assault, which is more like the usual SPL where you've got attack and sustain, so you can more easily alter that. So I've added a bit of tack and taken a little bit of the length off the kick just to make it a little bit tighter. So it's just adding a bit of thump. So that there are, you know, free transient designers around is great. I mean, obviously in Logic there's the enveloper does something like that, but they're all different, and the way that they respond to different sounds and kicks and snares is, you know, sometimes they don't always, a particular one doesn't always do exactly what you wanted. Carrying on with our dynamics then, there's this, there's the inevitable, isn't there, of trying to make your track louder. I mean, obviously we're treading on the toes of mastering the minute you put a limiter on your output. But in terms of judging your mix, if you don't do that at some point, you're on quite an unfair footing, aren't you, to try and even judge whether your mix is okay, because you can only compare it to people's things that have been mastered. So even if it's going to be mastered sort of properly later, I think it's very useful to go down that road and put some kind of limiter on the output. Obviously all software comes with something. The adaptive limiter's the better one in Logic, and you know, that's okay. There's a couple of other ones which I've recently come across here. So there's this Loud Max, which is, everyone's putting their actual names on their limiters. Thomas Munt has got this Loud Max one.
Nice one,
and
Thomas.
George Young has this W1 limiter, and they're, you know, fairly similar in terms of what they're doing. I've been unsure which is doing it better, but obviously it's doing a fine job of making it all louder. So that's the Loud Max one.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, I'm really impressed. You know, I haven't actually compared it against some of the obvious sort of Waves ones, the L1 or L2, but I suspect it's pretty near, sounds pretty much like it. And then the other one, W1, again, particularly with the adaptive release in it.
Slightly boxier.
Yeah, again, it's, you know, I do this same thing even if I've got, you know, everything available to me. Like, you know, if I'm in point blank studio trying to master something, I still do the same thing. I put all the possible limiters on and I kind of narrow it down and have them on the same settings and click between them and go, okay, on this track, that one's winning, so good.
Yeah. Especially with limiters, you're such a slave to what you're feeding it and to how it reacts, so you need to try multiple ones. Yeah.
Exactly, just it really depends on the track and how that particular track responds to it and how the sort of release times are adapting and whether it's multi-band or not and all that stuff. So both of these are great, again for free limiters that are really up there with kind of Waves equivalents. I think they're well worth checking out.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a bit of an onslaught of plugin going through, isn't it? So then all my concerns then about that are, well, how loud are we making it? I like to sort of measure some of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, a peak amount, the usual current sanity seems to be sort of putting the peak output at -0.3. That's then registering a little bit louder in Logic today, for whatever reason. But what we're usually busy with our limiters is bringing up the average, isn't it? Which we mention as RMS usually. That RMS thing has been around for a long time, and there's a newer concept, isn't there, which is
yeah, we've seen this one before.
loudness units, which yeah. So this LUFS meter is Klangfreund, I think, make this one.
Another catchy name, yeah.
Exactly. Well, sounds quite German. So again, it's measuring all these different speeds of averaging. So I think it's really worth getting used to this, obviously, because it's, you know, it's becoming law in broadcast and all this stuff, and it's potentially going to affect how loud people make records. Because if the averaging is being pulled down, I mean, it's very low, this suggested level for broadcast and so on. But it's still, they seem like a really good way of, it's a sort of improvement on RMS, sort of perceived loudness metering, really, loudness units relative to full scale LUFS. So this is showing us that. So again, this isn't super loud at the moment, you know. A pretty loud record might be, you know, similar to RMS really, and you know,
so like -8.
Yeah, -8 is pretty loud, exactly.
Yeah.
I've got a few more dB I could go up on this one at the moment, and then back to these Hofer or Hofer people from earlier on. They've got again this one. This is also measuring LUFS, and it does a few other things. This as well. I've got a mono and stereo and phase flips and a fader and all sorts of panners on this. So this is another one in their free little bundle here. Quite a useful set of meters and tools in one thing. And then they have this other one that has two different ways of looking at the stereo spread of something. Has a unusual looking phase correlation stereo meter. So again, they're worth checking out. They're giving you more information. It has this weird panner. I haven't worked out what the middle and side panner means yet, but
no, that sounds good.
We'll get to that, yeah.
Maybe not on the master bus, but
well, yeah, I wouldn't be trying to pan my master bus around in that way, because you can also out-click it and go wider than all the way left and right, which is a slightly worrying thing to do. Level metering. At some point, I know you're just going to go, time's up. You're out of
well,
time.
let's get to the sexiest ones, and then we can.
Yeah. Well,
we've got how many? We've got 30 something.
There's quite a lot in here. Yeah. Saturation and distortion is a favourite. The things that we spent all our time avoiding when we were making analog records, and then trying to add character again. So on my claps, nearly always end up with some kind of saturation or distortion onto me, or snares, that thing of just being able to change the shape of it considerably and beef it up. So I've tried quite a few on here, so we'll just have a little look through. And they're all good in their own place. So the one I've actually gone with, again, is another one from Klanghelm, this AVGI, which I recently bought their bigger version of this because I like saturation and distortion. It was only something like 20 euros and has quite a few different circuit types in it. And this is basically one of them they've taken out of that. I think it's supposed to be modelling some kind of analog console. And they have all these other ones, valve distortions and things. But this one, obviously all these things are going to make the clap louder, but also adding, you know, a fair bit of body to it.
Yeah.
So that was the one I actually went with, but I did then try many other ones. I think someone just mentioned this in the chat a minute ago. It's quite a new one, I think. Rob Chokehold Designs Clipmax. So this one's again giving it a bit of a smack in a different way. Again, you know, there's a few different settings on here. It's a kind of soft clip thing, which could be useful as well for rounding off transients if they're troubling you. Vox Engo, who actually have a massive amount of free plugins. I'm not going to be able to mention all of those today, but one of them is this tube amp. So again, it's trying to emulate some kind of tube type distortion shape. And it's, yeah, definitely, again, yeah, in a way, sort of hearing them in solo, they're offering quite similar sort of sounds on the same clap sound. But how they respond on different things like basses or synths or other things, you know, they're always just worth experimenting with a few of them. And sometimes it's just finding the one that you just like it when you kind of turn up the drive and it's kind of like, yeah, I like that, it's doing something that I'm enjoying. Or sometimes it's even just like the interface, isn't it? It's like, oh, I don't like looking at that, I'm not going to use that. Camel Crusher, again, another classic that I'm being very sensible with it. Obviously it can do really extreme things, can't it? And has all these couple of different types of distortion and filter and compressor and so on. Again, can do all this, you know, pretty kind of more extreme stuff. Great little plugin that's been free for some time. We'll have to see how they progress with having been bought by Apple, as far as we know.
Oh, of course.
And then this one as well. So this was from Clip Freak. I'm trying to remember who makes this now. Audio Assault again. I think that was the same people that made that Transient. They do another one as well that does some really crazy distortion thing, the name of which escapes me at this precise moment. I like the name, Audio Assault. It's a cool name for it, isn't it? Why does it sound like it's not doing much at the moment? Anyway.
I think the mix is done.
Maybe so. Obviously, okay, it's kind of
a bit more digital
clippy sound. Well, it does say clip, to be fair, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's quite a few different distortion saturators to check out there, all with different characters if you try them on different things. So that's my little saturation distortion bit. Stereo tools, things to affect stereo wideness. I'm using this thing just loads at the moment, this Alex Hilton stereo imager, I think.
Yeah, we've seen
mentioned this before, but it's a great plugin. Partly, you know, so it's just doing the stereo width thing, very much like the Waves S1 imager, where you kind of, you know, push the width in and out and tip that around and narrow it, whatever. But the thing, you know, for me in a free plugin that exists is this safe bass thing where you can center under a certain frequency, because there's very many, you know, synth sounds or bass sounds that if you just mono it, it kills it. But having that low frequency centered is the thing that's really important. So I'm using this one a lot. It's, you know, yeah, the safe bass bit over here, and then, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Tipper and widener and narrower. Try and put that back in the middle now. Does have another mode where more things come up on there. It's also, he's brought out another free plugin recently that isn't to do with stereo imaging, which is this, did we get it going? Oh yeah, this trigger gate one. So again, it's another free one that's this idea of gating something, so it's being triggered from something else. Where did I just find that? I just opened it somewhere and now I can't see it. Okay, over here. So for example, on this sound here, just have a very quick look at that. Slightly out of my order here with, have I managed to go to a bit where that sound isn't going on? Excellent. Oh, my computer doesn't work anymore. So I tried it on this, but it wasn't the right thing for this noise, but does all these different kind of...
transgate, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's just one of the presets in it, but as well it has like a distortion type drive in it, and then echoes and delays and things, so it's a very useful little tool actually. I didn't leave it on that particular track, but I was trying it out on there. Other ones that are, again, pretty useful, this Flux stereo tool. Again, they've made this up to 64-bit recently as well. Just this thing of having something that partly is displaying the stereo picture, but also has a left and right panner, because most software always has this balance control on a stereo track. So it's not really, when you go left, it's just turning the right down, isn't it? Rather than moving the right to the left. So having that, having this phase correlation meter, which looks very suspiciously slightly on the left, as it turns out. And has a widener and narrower and so on, and it also, so you can, and tipper, so you could make something narrower or wider with it. So it's a pretty useful tool to have from Flux, the same people that make the little transienter, the bittersweet thing that we mentioned earlier on. And the other one that I'd used here as well was this, another one from Foxengo. It's basically a stereo widener. I mean, one of the ways of making more stereo width is using short delays to the left and to the right, and on this sound it makes a pretty big difference to the sort of space on that ambient noise. So and that was just, I just turned it on, I didn't tweak anything, so it's like, oh cool, I like it. So as you can see, it's got two different delays to the different sides. So again, it's worth having a little look through all the Foxengo list there. And so there's some pretty good stereo tools there. And another one that also, you could argue, has a similar effect, though it's, they say it's a chorus on their site, this Acon Digital Multiply, again, which is free and been around a little while. Again, you know, a lot of the presets are really good at it, but some of these sounds that were sort of similar-ish, trying to give this sound a little bit more depth and difference from the other synth, because they're really overlapping frequency-wise considerably, and that just made it enough different to be able to hear it as its own thing in its own space. So another great, seems more than a chorus, it's like some sort of doubler or something. Hear it that well, but it definitely gives it its own little world there. There's another company I feel like I really should mention, even though I didn't end up using much of their stuff. I did try this on it. Tal, who have made a huge amount of great plugins. Some of their ones have become a bit lost because of the whole 32-bit, 64-bit thing. I don't know if they're going to bother to rewrite them. But we were talking about that before, weren't we, of using something else, so that if you can incorporate 32-bit plugins still, you mentioned was it 32 lives?
32 lives, yeah.
It's quality. Seems to work great.
Yeah,
to, you know, to revive all those things that you previously thought were not going to work. So this is a great chorus. This is the chorus out of a like out of a Juno, and it has the two different settings or both at once, and a great sounding thing. Should probably have it without the other one, but again, just adding more space and depth to something. It's,
yeah, pretty extreme.
Yeah, I know, but it's great, isn't it? It sounds, it's really like that totally classic kind of Roland synth type chorus thing.
Yeah.
Brilliant thing. When I was looking as well at things like reverbs, that's really one area that nobody seems to be making particularly great free ones. I mean, there are a few out there. I think I did actually use a couple of things, like, again, Tal make a couple of different reverbs here, and there's a Foxengo one, and there's this one, Ambience, as well, that's been around a while. And they all sound fine, but they're not necessarily offering anything that's better than you probably have in Space Designer or Platinum Verb or whatever else you've got. So check them out if you want. I wasn't finding that they really gave me anything different. My guess is that it's just harder to make a really good reverb, and probably costs money and all the rest of it. So like, why would you make a brilliant one and give it away? That's my guess with that. Also with delays, some of the ones that I really did like that were around, that were really interesting, free ones, mostly again from Tal. Tal had these 3 different dub delays, and there's a company called GSI that made a copy of a Watkins Copycat tape echo, and they also do a, it wasn't free, but a very cheap like Roland Space Echo. And again, they're all 32-bit, so unless you find some way of getting your 32-bit plugins to work. So I keep meaning to check out the demo of 32 Lives to see if I'm going to go down that road. But one of the other things, so I mean, that's quite a lot of the ones I wanted to have a look at right now. there are many more. Like, well, how do you find out about them is the obvious thing. I mean, a lot of things, for me, they come up on Facebook groups that I'm in, whether that's, one that they come up a lot is Logic Pro Expert, for example, or, if you're in any of these
Logic
groups.
Pro Expert,
like,
yeah, I know it well.
Like Danny Lewis's underground music production thing,
Yeah.
people are always going, have you seen this one? And those kind of things, because sometimes these plugins are free, but only for
A limited amount
a
of time.
short time,
Yeah.
and if you miss it, you missed it. And some of them are like, I was looking at one we were talking about earlier on, which I've tried to get working. So I was trying to find a third-party compressor that you could sidechain. And the only thing I could find was the Eventide Ultra channel. And I thought I'd check, because I did get it for free when it was available. And I checked yesterday, and it's now $249, which, it's a very in-depth plugin.
Quite
But
a big difference, yeah.
that's quite different from free.
Yeah.
It's like more than Logic cost, probably, isn't it?
Yeah.
So again, people like Sound Toys. Again, have these ones
They
that
do
are
like
great, that
giveaways,
they,
yeah.
are for some short time are free. All these ones like the little Primal Tap or Alter Boy, and I think there was
Yeah.
another sort of saturation one that I missed also. Sine Vibes as well. There was one called Turbo that was great, that was free. They have these other ones like Atom, and again, check out. It's really
Yeah.
just to keep your eye on the ball with
Yeah,
this stuff,
exactly.
because some of the stuff you can easily
There's
miss.
so many, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
you guys just keep putting them in the comments when the video's archived. And I'll also make a list of all these plugins so you can click on it and download it when we finish the broadcast.
Yeah.
But just before we do finish the broadcast, we do have some questions, so just
Yeah.
quickly get to them. Alexander Lindgren is asking, what free EQ plugin would you use to take out really harsh peaks?
To be honest, the stock plugins in your software are probably the best for doing really accurate
Yeah.
surgical things.
It's
A
like
lot of
notchy,
these
yeah.
ones are more like sort of adding character and doing pretty broad things, and they're not there with an analyzer. Probably out of the ones we looked at today, that color EQ is one of the ones that actually can do some pretty narrow little cuts. Whether it's, you're probably better off just using your Ableton or Logic, or
Yeah.
for that kind of accurate cutting thing, it's just being able to really get a narrow thing, and also to see, along with hearing, where obvious peaks are.
Yeah.
I would just use your stock ones in your DAW, to be honest.
Cool. So David Barr is asking, what should the dB levels be? dB levels be for a kick, bass, and for mid and high frequency instruments?
dB levels,
As in how loud they should be, I guess. But it's all in context, isn't it?
Well, it is, because it on its own, like a kick on its own, well, how loud is it? Is it recorded? Is it coming out of an instrument? How loud is that? Okay, all that really matters is how loud that then is when it sums to the mix bus.
Yeah.
We're always trying to, if I took all these plugins off here, I did actually check at some point, you're always aiming for the whole lot of your mix summing together to be in this little window between like -6 and -3. So
Right.
that there's some headroom in your whole mix. So that's the peak of everything. So wherever that comes out as, so if your kick ends up being the loudest thing in your track, that's going to tell you where to put it, isn't it? So that
And you just
that's
kinda work
hitting
around
your
that.
output bus is somewhere between -6 and -3 at the end of your mix.
Yeah.
So a good starting point is way below that if you're going to kind of add anything to it, or add any punch, or add any transients or frequencies or anything. You really want to be starting low.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to not make your whole mix clip, particularly when you're learning to do it. I quite often trick myself by turning my monitors up too loud
Yeah, I
when I
was gonna
start a
say.
mix, and then I don't push the first fader up as far.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do to get yourself going, because there's only so far with a mix you can go before you can select everything and pull it down again.
Yeah.
Once it's complex, it all falls apart at that point. If you're sending to things and so on, you can't really do it anymore, and then you have to find some other solution to your clippy levels.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, we are out of time for today's FFL. Hopefully you got plenty of inspiration for the weekend, and do check out all those plugins. And if you're keen to learn more about mixing and sound engineering, make sure you check out our courses at pointblanklondon.com. We'll be back next week for another FFL, so we'll see you then.